Well, hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. I know I haven't been uploading much recently, but I'm still gonna try and do my best. However, we do have some news that we definitely need to cover, and that is Battlegrounds Season 11 Victory Track and Gladiator Circuit meta, and they are also giving us Season 12 metas, which is awesome. It's always super good and advantageous to know the upcoming metas to actually try and figure out which champions, if you are going to be doing Battleground specific rank ups, which champions are going to be the ones to go for. And this time around, as they're saying, there is going to be something new. This is going to be the first season with seeding and attacker buffs. Now, overall, truthfully, I'm not entirely sure how I feel about attacker buffs, but well, we're going to take it step by step and break them down, and then, well, later we're going to figure out how we feel about them. So for Season 11 and future season, we will be testing out giving the attackers more tools. We're theming this season around prowess and tech champs during gunning to take them down. So the attacker buff is going to be specific for tech champs. Tech champions cannot have their ability accuracy lowered, which means every tech champion is going to be a great domino counter by default. Whenever the tech attackers gain an armor up buff or inflict an armor break debuff, remove one of the defender's prowess effect. Whenever tech attackers remove a prowess, they gain a fury passive, granting 10% attack rating for 20 seconds. That's a decent amount of time. Max stacks 20. So there will be certain champions that just go absolutely ham on attack, especially considering the fact that the defender buff is combat deja vu prowess. So landing the same type of basic attack twice in a row grants the defender prowess buff, increasing special attack damage by 50%. But of course, if you are using tech champions, you're going to be able to get rid of them and boost your own attack. Now, the next node is prowess puncture. So that basically will just increase the amount of block damage, which isn't anything hard to deal with, and that's about it for victory track. So overall, what's the best way to explain it? I'm sure that some people will love this meta, but in theory, I don't. Because for most part, this meta sounds almost easier in a sense if you have a relatively decent tech roster than normal, than you would do an arena fight. You know, if arena fights were longer with the health pools of Battlegrounds, you would be able to finish these fights faster in many cases, because these prowess buffs are going to be buffs. And that means that not only tech champions will be able to enjoy benefits of ramping up faster, benefiting from the attacker node, but also we're going to have mystic champions that will get their nullifies fueled and everything else. So mystic champions are going to be really, really powerful in this meta too. And then we're going to have potentially even Ronin. I'm not entirely sure how it's going to work, but I do think that you will be able to just permanently Ronin stun lock stuff, because there's nothing to do with stun immunity. So that's going to make a return. So overall, this sounds just about as nuki meta as we have seen, I think. And I kind of don't like that. But again, we're going to have to play through it, and it is just the victory track. So let's take a look at the Gladiator Circuit weeks 1 and 2 meta. So the attacker buff is exactly the same. Combat deja vu prowess is exactly the same. Prowess puncture as well. And then we have rise to power. When the defender is knocked down, a 4-second timer starts. While active, each time the defender lands a hit or strikes into the block, they gain 30% bar of power. And this, again, is kind of like a little bit of a nothing node in most cases. There will be fights, obviously, when you do end up getting caught out by it, when, you know, Dex doesn't work and you accidentally end up taking a hit in a block and opponent get to level 3. But overall, ultimately, does this increase the fight difficulty? The answer is barely. So this is still going to be insanely nuki meta for the first 2 weeks. So at the very least, in theory, these aren't the type of metas that I'm personally particularly fond of. Let's take a look at weeks 3 and 4. We have fully operational. Tech champions cannot have their ability actually reduced. Basically the same node here. And then we have escalating prowess. And this meta is trickier. But again, since it's so tech themed, I have my reservations about it. I do like it better in theory because it's going to be less nukey, I think. Where every 5 seconds, the defender gains an indefinite prowess buff, increasing special attack damage by 10%. Now, again, since this is buff, certain Mystic champions will be significantly stronger, but not all of them, because these will not expire naturally. So champions like Mojo or Absorbing Man and so on will not be able to benefit from it because these are permanent buffs. And unless you do have the stagger nullify fate seal things going, not all Mystic champions are going to be as overpowered here. But the prowess protection part is something that does worry me, because for each prowess effect active on the defender, they reduce the incoming damage by 5%. And that means within 50 seconds of the fight, you only do half of your damage. Within 100 seconds of the fight, you cannot do any damage at all. And this is already quite significantly exclusionary, which basically means you have to deal with prowess or be an insane nuke. Like, I do think, Human Torch is going to work just fine, but other than him and a handful of other champions, you basically will have to get rid of them. Otherwise, you do not damage. Which again means you're going to have to rely on the attacker tactic, as in tech champions, or, well, effectively largely Mystic champions. So it's going to mean that we're going to have tech and Mystic attackers and champions that directly counter them, because not much else will work. So it does sound a bit messy. We'll see. Obviously, we need to play through it. Then there's also window of opportunity stun, which again is something that we'll have to play through. I do like the inclusion of that node. I do think it is skill-based node. And yeah, so that's the type of node I like. But the fact that we're going to be getting this prowess protection, that is somewhat worrisome. And then we have season 12 buffs. They still do reserve the right to modify them, but in this season we're going to have offensive buff called Decay, and that is going to mean that attackers are immune to placebo buffs, which is going to be very important. And whenever they trigger a buff immunity, inflict a 20% wither debuff on the opponent lasting 8 seconds, max 5. So you're going to be placing withers basically with every champion on your opponent. Attackers gain 35% resistance to damage over time effects for each debuff on the defender. This is going to be extremely interesting. And then also when the defender is knocked down, there's 25% chance per debuff to inflict a 10-second slow, which is also quite cool. So I kind of like this node, especially because there will be some crazy annoying interactions. Like, this node is by default going to fuel, let's say, Baron Zemo, and you're going to end up rooted whether you like it or not, because the key to fighting Baron Zemo is not placing debuffs on them. With this tactic, you cannot not place the debuffs, so you will get rooted. Obviously, there will be quite a few other interactions of similar nature. And then defender buffs are making a contact with the defender has a 100% chance to grant the attacker a 30-second placebo buff, which is where the immunity is going to come into play, which is how every champion is going to gain the withers. And then we're going to have Prey on the Weak, which is again going to actually, due to withers, in vast majority of the cases, reverse the power gain, and you will benefit when your buffs expire, in a sense. Or nullified and so on and so forth. So it is going to be quite interesting to see these interactions here. I hope Kabam has worked through these interactions and that it works fine. And then in Gladiator Circuit, we will additionally have Staggering Beauty, which means while close to the defender, you're going to get staggered every 3 seconds, nullifying the next buff. And this I quite like because this is a staggered debuff, which means attackers will be able to gain willpower heal, and it also means that you will be able to fuel certain defenders that get their abilities triggered when you get staggered. So this does sound a bit more interesting. It will be probably a meta where champions finish pretty much with full health, in most cases. So again, something we haven't played through, and it's a new thing, therefore I'm definitely willing and interested to check it out. And the same attacker buff for week 3 and 4, but the defender buffs are changing now with hazard shift, bleed, and shock. And this obviously is going to make it even more tricky because there's going to be a ton of champions that aren't particularly viable. And for a Gladiator Circuit meta, I don't really mind it. So striking the defender will have a 40% chance to inflict attacker with a shock debuff, dealing 30% of defender's attack, and every 12 seconds it's swapped to bleed. Additionally, kinda good defense. The attacker's well-timed blocks place a random debuff from weakness, armor break, suppression, disorient on the defender for 13 seconds. I quite like this node, it's quite cool, it's somewhat helpful, and that weakness could also potentially help you mitigate some hazard shift damage as well. So I'm gonna be honest, I kind of prefer season 12 buffs more so than season 11, especially because season 11 specifically places kind of more of an accent on one single class, which is tech class. And there will be definitely people who just don't have many good tech champions, and because of it, as I said as well, especially in week 3 and 4, due to the fact that you will be significantly slower unless you can get rid of the prowess effects, it will effectively mean that you'll only have at large the tech champions, and you're gonna have the mystic champions to get rid of buffs. Obviously, there will be a handful of exceptions, like we will have a CGR who has Fate Seal. Venom perhaps will work with the level 1s as well as Venom Pool, and there are a handful of other champions that could potentially work. For instance, maybe Rogue could be a bit of a sleeper, because once Rogue steals opponent's buff while she has that buff, opponent can't gain any more of them, plus that prowess could be helpful to gain. So that might work. There will be some interesting things to work out, but I just hope that in future Kebab doesn't do these class things, because it is extremely kind of like RPG to a degree where I don't think it helps the competition. I think it hurts much more. The DK thing I think is much more interesting, but again, as a final side note, I do not know whether I will be able to be fully operational for the start of the season, which is going to be August the 9th. August the 9th. Oh wait. What are those dates? Season August the 9th, 20th, and June. What the fudge? Either way. August the 9th is tomorrow. Is it starting tomorrow? What? Anyways, if the Battlegrounds season starts when it is supposed to start, I don't know if I'll be able to stream from the very beginning, but I'll do my best. Because, I'm still waiting for my boxes, and I'm still looking for a place where I can actually set up and try and get internet and all that other stuff. But I hope you guys found this video useful. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will catch you guys later. Bye-bye.